when the show is on, when the audience is there, there is an energy, a circle of energy that has to start from the artist on stage, go out to you as an audience, and come back to the artists that are on the stage. If this circle is not complete, if it's broken due to some, and it's always energy, we're dealing with music, music is pure energy. If the sound is not right, if the performance is not right, if the audience is bored and I see it immediately, I feel it,
wow,
then you have to tweak it and look at it as a whole.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with C-Tech. This episode is very, very special. If you're into music, if you're into thinking about life, this episode is for you. Meet Gadi Gidor, artistic director, career manager, and also a good friend. Gadi was born in Israel right before they put a man on the moon. He moved to New York upon completing his 3 years of mandatory military service and graduated with a bachelor's degree from NYU Stern School of Business, as well as with an MBA degree from Harvard University. He had been working his entire professional life in the music industry, assuming various roles in major record companies. Currently, he is enjoying his independence as a freelance artist, manager, and consultant. Gadi is married to Yuri Kato and is the father of Yasmin, Leah, and Eden. He is also one of the founding fathers of the modern Israeli music industry. Welcome, Gadi. Gadi Gidor, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders.
Thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure.
I've done almost 500 episodes now. This I've been waiting for. It's hard to explain why, but I'm sitting here with somebody that the work that you've done has brought so much joy into my life and millions of lives, whether they know it or not. And you're also a lot of times backstage, right?
I make it a rule to be backstage, always. Yeah.
Figuratively, but also practically.
Physically, practically, absolutely, yes. I believe my job is to put the artist first in the front and make the most out of them.
Right.
Those who have to be in the shadows should remain there.
So I'm going to put you in the front for just a little bit now because I have to give context.
I'm going to try and behave normally, yep.
The context here is important because I'm sitting next to somebody, NYU, Harvard, coming back working with some of the most incredible artists in Israel, from Idan Reichel to Eli Botner, Shiri Maimon, Eurovision, the Project of Idan Reichel. It's really shaping the Israeli music industry with insights that I can't wait to get to here. And I want you to take me back a little bit. It's not trivial getting to where you got to and having the unique experiences that you've had. Tell me a little bit about that.
Immediately upon being released from the IDF, from the Israeli army, I found myself flying to the Big Apple, New York. I was a musician from the age of 3. I think the first thing I ever said was that I want a guitar, and my hands were too short, so it took a few years to find a private tutor who would be able to teach me how to play. But that was obvious to me. My life were revolving around music from day one. And my biggest hobby, my biggest passion was every cent I ever made as a teenager working was to run to the local record store in Tel Aviv and buy the new LP and come home and smell the vinyl because it was always a gorgeous smell. I learned English by reading the lyrics of my favorite albums. Where it becomes more complicated is as I'm growing up, my father, who's a big figure in the Israeli defense industry of the good old age, he insisted on me not going into music because according to him, a Holocaust survivor, music cannot be a profession. And I listened to him up to a point. I left the army, I went to New York, I was fortunate enough to be admitted to NYU, Stern School of Business. And I met my wife there, Yuri. I'm mentioning her because she's probably the biggest teacher I have on my journey. Yuri is not a Russian man, it's a Japanese lady in this case. And after I graduated 3 years into my first, my MBA, sorry, my BA. At night, I used to go and study at the IAR, Institute of Audio Research, down University Place in the village.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to neglect my musical ambitions. So I was doing business in the morning and I went to this great school at night to learn sound engineering. Amazing years down in the village. You can only imagine how much music and culture is there, early 90s. And then I went back to Israel, worked in the biggest record company in Israel. I was in charge of BMG catalog in Israel. BMG back then is one of the 5 majors.
Wow.
Obviously, it went well. I was very flattered when BMG offered me a position in the headquarters, European headquarters, back in '95. And I was fortunate enough to get there to Munich and spend 2 years there, right after the perestroika, end of '80s, beginning of the '90s, where basically the music industry, global music industry, is learning to cope with Eastern Europe.
Wow.
And I was one of the people who were in charge of building a bridge between the Eastern European territories. I did A&R and marketing with them and bridging to Western Europe and trying to create a common language. It was incredible. I was waking up every morning, meeting the legends of my childhood. I was working with Annie Lennox on a tour, global tour. Incredible. And then Harvard, MBA, again, amazing compliment to be admitted to that school. Boston, 2 years. And all throughout, I'm constantly worried about losing my grip on the music business. Once I graduated from Harvard, it was apparent to me that it's either staying with BMG in North America and becoming one of the strategic people of this huge major company, Bertelsmann Music Group.
A dream for any strategist in the music industry.
Right. Or
The dream.
Or giving up on a huge salary, coming back to Israel after spending almost 10 years overseas. And the reason I came back, and maybe this is the point of it all, I realized that if I'm not in Israel, where I was born and raised, I wouldn't be able to be hands-on on the music. I would be forever stuck, quote unquote, in a great job with great salary, strategy and board meetings, but the music was the point, the music was the trigger, and I just couldn't see myself looking forward without being hands-on involved with the music. And so what happened, as of '98, I came back to Israel and I realized, as I was being hired back into the local industry, I realized that I'm one of the few who is fortunate enough to be able to work with a musical endeavor or startup, starting with the composition, with the studio, with the arrangements, with the production, with the sound,
the experience,
the real making of the song.
Wow.
But being able to also strategize how this song or album or artist or career are gonna be rolled into the market, strategy included, being involved in every detail, commercial detail, the pricing of a ticket in the box office, all the way to the poster or the art of the cover of the album.
Wow.
An amazing experience, because then you realize you can be not only the director of the film or the photographer, but also the producer and the strategy behind. And so it's a 360 really experience, and music became a religion.
Wow.
Finally and truthfully, I was able to realize all my knowledge, all the stuff that I've acquired in New York and Boston and over the years, and internationally and locally in Japan and Germany and America and Israel, and then the projects, it turned well. I'm very fortunate to have worked with the biggest talents that Israel can produce. It's amazing. It's an amazing journey. I'm very fortunate and very lucky.
I have to tell you, I spoke to a lot of people here, people that did really amazing things. The authenticity, I believe you so much when you talk about bridging your passions together, taking a non-trivial path, foregoing the dream that people will work their whole life to achieve, to sort of come back down to earth, to the local scene. Israel, 9 million people. It was 6 or 5 back then, I think.
Right, absolutely.
Not a huge music industry.
No, not at all. Not a professional one even.
Yet, and I'm hearing you say, I'm lucky to have been able to make that choice.
This is not something that I believe nowadays that I chose. This is something that chose me. There was no going against that internal flame, the urge, the passion. It's bordering craziness at times. You cannot not do it. In that way, I think I was lucky because I understand from many colleagues of mine that I lost some time with career choices and you know, how to progress with life and what should I do next. There was no question with me, and that's why I was fortunate. The calling was such a strong inner voice that every time I deviated from it too far,
wow,
I had to go back and zero in on what it is that I started doing and what it is I want to do with my life, and it was so obvious, and it was just a matter of staying on track. Never knowing what's coming next, but obviously if you're answering your call, the universe does listen. I know it sounds like a big cliche, but that's my personal journey, and that's what I'm grateful for.
Now, Gadi, I want to pick your brain soon about your insights into the music industry.
Yeah.
In order to do that truthfully, I really want to ask about your experience in 2006 and how that provides some perspective that you mentioned would be very, very difficult to achieve without.
Yeah. January 2006 was the peak time of my musical success here in the local market with the project of Idan Reichel, with Shiri Maimon and the Eurovision, with Ivri Leader, with Eli Botner, with heroes of my child. I was involved with many projects. I felt like I'm taking too much on. 2-3 months before what I'm about to say, I already felt something is wrong.
Wow.
Again, that inner voice, that inner compass, which should be listened to very much. It's a strong advice. If you know and you hear your inner voice talking, better be tuned into it. I unfortunately was involved with a terrible car accident, January 2006. It was entirely my fault. My eyes weren't on the road as I was driving. I was probably changing CDs, listening to demos, or a phone call came in and I was busy picking it up. The next thing I know, I am put into an ambulance. That's when I woke up. I have no idea of how long I was unconscious. But I woke up and I knew, and I'm telling you honestly, again, that inner voice, I knew as I'm being put into the ambulance that first, my situation is severe, is bad. B, I'm going to be totally fine. I knew that as I was placed in the ambulance. Insights from a crashing event like that are numerous. First of all, it's a big crisis is a big gift. A big crisis is when somebody puts a fork in the wheel and you're forced to stop, really stop. The corona is yet another crisis that forced the human race to stop. And I realized maybe the hardest thing for humans to do is to stop. But the accident 2006 forced me, the hyperactive guy who's now busy realizing all his dreams, to stop for 6 months of rehabilitation and physical rehabilitation. It forced me to stop and look inside and look at all those times that my wife was saying, please look at the road, and I was too arrogant to listen. But deeper than that, I was forced to stop and examine the hard disk here. The hard disk here was full of ego because that was the culmination of 6 years of, like I said, being involved with many of these successful musical projects. And music being my hobby and my passion and my profession, when you're experiencing so much success over such a short period of time, you start thinking maybe it's your doing. Maybe it's what your touch your instinct, your strategy. And I think the only way to dismantle this ticking bomb and this mega ego who's sitting there thinking that it's all he's doing was to have this car accident happen. I don't think a smaller lesson would have helped. I found myself immediately after the accident reading books that never before were even close to being in my vicinity or even interesting, remotely interesting to me. It went from Buddhism to Indian Advaita to quantum physics to interpersonal psychology. And I don't remember how I ended up reading and listening to these podcasts and courses, audio courses. It was just an amok run led by a stronger force. Sorry, it sounds spiritual, but it's not.
What I'm hearing you though, and I'm drawing a thread from you before, because you didn't change as a person. What I'm hearing you is, you perhaps at the end there was a big change, but I'm hearing you took the same intellectual curiosity.
Right.
And the same ambition to learn and understand.
Right. Only this time the energy was
directed internally.
Exactly.
But exactly the same passion, the same drive, but now the other direction.
Absolutely. You take the camera, which is always facing the outside world, and you're saying once and for all, having experienced such a crisis and such a big blow.
And the highs of the world.
The highs of the highs. You turn the camera and now you're saying, okay, I missed the plot.
Wow.
I thought I'm in control. Obviously I ain't. I thought I know. Obviously I don't. I thought it was all about me. Obviously it is not. I've got to undo me. And this is not a realization that comes all of a sudden at one time and you're floating on a cloud. It's a process that is ongoing now as we speak for 15 years. And the internal change and the internal mechanisms that you're so caught up with, or basically a victim of, all of a sudden are being unraveled one thread at a time until you can look at the inside mechanism at your own hard disk parallelly to being in tune with what's happening around you and outside. And if you can balance the two, then it's a whole new world.
We met for the first time a week and a half ago.
Right.
At Eli Botner's concert, Balgalkon. One of the first concerts in Israel and the world post-COVID.
Right.
And I saw you standing behind the audience.
Right.
Where the
Very
sound,
close to the sound.
very close, but behind the audience, from far.
Right.
One of the farthest people from the show.
Right.
You're smiling. Mm-hmm. I had the chance to come up through a mutual friend and to thank you for the gift that you and Eli and the rest gave me. And I was thinking about that smile and your contentness for a long time and your distance from the actual show. I would imagine that you would be right backstage, right next to Eli, 2 meters away. You were back.
Why? That's a great question. Thank you for giving me a chance to think about it. First of all, I'm very close to the sound board, which is the brain of what's going on stage. In case there is anything wrong or some tweaking that has to be done, me being the director of the show or the director of the movie, I'm very close and one whisper to the sound engineer and things are balanced again. So that's one reason. The second reason is, that's a gorgeous thing. I'm a very firm believer of the yin and yang. I think you can only understand something thoroughly if you see both sides of the story, or the problem, or the person, or the case. With the music show, for me, of course, God is in the details, as we say, and every note and every instrument and every part and every word being sung by the lead singers, those are the details. But having been with Eli Botner for 15 years and knowing every single detail, every single bar, every single note in that production, my duty, as far as I understand it, is to zoom out so I can also see the whole experience that we're trying to put up as a show and to have our audience go through. We have to be in touch with the overall experience and not just be bogged down with the details, nitty-gritty details. When the show is on, when the audience is there, there is an energy, a circle of energy that has to start from the artist on stage, go out to you as an audience, and come back to the artists that are on the stage. If this circle is not complete, if it's broken due to some, and it's always energy, we're dealing with music, music is pure energy. If the sound is not right, if the performance is not right, if the audience is bored and I see it immediately, I feel it,
wow,
then you have to tweak it and look at it as a whole. And the details we've taken care of when we were recording the songs, when we were rehearsing the songs, there's time for details and there's time for a whole for me. And I keep shifting from being up close and personal to zooming out. Like I keep shifting from the inner mechanisms of the ego to the outside world where I have to interact. That's being married to a Japanese lady. Here it is for you in a nutshell.
I can't even express how much fun I'm having and how
Same
inspiring
here,
all this. It's amazing. Zooming out a little bit more, you've been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah.
You've seen changes.
Yeah.
I heard today a talk you gave at Rimon, I believe in their culminating event in 2019.
Right.
And you were speaking to the new upcoming artists that are going to emerge into this industry. And you talked to them, to their brain and their heart from your deep experience. Right. Share with me a little bit how you perceive, the ever-changing world with the music industry specifically.
Okay. So the music industry was there at the forefront of the new digital revolution. May I remind everybody who's watching that we're talking about Napster, 98. Napster was a file sharing program. The record companies were suing users of Napster back then. And I'm mentioning that because 1998, the world is not yet surfing the internet as a default. We're not yet doing shopping online. We don't have a Zoom. This world is still very much in its infancy stages. And the record business is already challenged with a huge problem, which is how to get over the fact that our product, the music industry's product, is so light, so sexy, so immediate, so common, so simple, that you can absolutely take it from its rightful owners and just send it out on the internet, and millions of people are enjoying it for free. Now, do you allow it because it's a new day and age? Or as the rights owner or the recording owner, you immediately grab your whatever you can and try to recreate the stability that you've known? This was the mistake that the music industry was making back then.
They decided
to attach themselves to the old system, the old formula, the old structures, not paying enough attention to the fact that their biggest fans, the users, the customers, are now saying clearly out loud, the way we're going to consume your product has changed and it's going to remain like that forever. We're not going to buy CDs anymore. We're not going to be told what to listen to, when and how. We're going to listen to music on the fly, wherever we are, on demand, all the time. And that was it. A new era was dawning. And the music industry, and it's known, there are books written all over it, all about it. The music industry was dealing with this enormous challenge in a very crooked way. You cannot blame them because it's very hard to be in the eye of the storm and have the perspective already in real time to change your ways. A car accident did it for me, but that too starts a process happening. It's not that you get all the answers immediately. So it took a while for the music industry to adjust. Here's the point. The user, that's where your focus should be. Your customer, your user, the people you're trying to create the experience for, the audience. That's where your attention should be. And the patterns of consuming music consumption, the way we listen to music nowadays is completely different. I'll throw some numbers at you. Every day, there are 60 to 80,000 songs a day being uploaded to the internet, which means it's 500,000 new tracks a week, 2 million songs a month are being uploaded to the internet every month. And this number is rising and rising. 2 million songs. No one, no matter how big a music fan you are, no one can find his way or her way around 2 million songs, not to mention the fact that this is parallel to a surplus of videos and podcasts and stories and visuals and still pictures and content, which means that all barriers are gone. Every household, if there is a curious child there with a computer at hand, is a potential recording studio.
One of the lines that you said to the students, when you drive home from Rimon today, you look at the windows.
Look out the window of your car and look at all the apartments you're driving by.
Each of those is a potential
of those is a potential recording studio. Now let's talk about what changed in the consumer's pattern of consumption. Because there is so much of it, even if I am the biggest music fan, because I'm flooded with music 24/7, two things are happening. One is I become indifferent. It's very hard to move me. It's very hard to get to me because I'm constantly bombarded with music. That creates indifference. How do you tackle that indifference? You have to raise the bar. The experience that you want to put your listener through has to change. Okay? Another thing is happening. The way we interface with music nowadays is, while all of us are busier than ever, short attention span, shorter than ever, the human race is going through something. And interfacing with the world is changing. And so, the songs are changing. Look carefully and you'll see that many tracks nowadays start with a chorus and not with a verse like the classic model.
Immediate gratification, is that why?
Immediate gratification, because here is another data for you. In 12 seconds, and this is an official data point, it takes the average music fan 12 seconds to decide whether you stick with the song or you go to the next.
Wow.
12 seconds is nothing. No wonder the songs became shorter. It used to be 3 and 4 minutes in the 80s and 90s. It's now down to 2:30.
Wow.
This is a physical change of how we produce music. And also, it's very clear to us, the music makers, that we have practically 12 seconds to convince you, or else you skip to the next track.
So here's a question for you. What does that do to the creativity? What does that do to you as an artist? You're saying, I'm a musician. Absolutely. I have it's a part of my soul. Right. I'm not doing this I'm doing this because I need to.
Right.
But now instead of, I listen to American Pie, Don McLean, 7.5 minutes.
Right, or Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen, 6 minutes.
Now,
what do we do? How do we create? It does affect the way music is being written. First and foremost, my experience with working with young generations of musicians, no longer do you finish working on a song at home and you bring a whole piece to the studio to be produced. This is the old ways. Nowadays, we're sitting in the studio and we're creating as we go. Somebody is writing a verse, somebody parallelly is playing around with some beats, somebody is doodling on the keyboards to come up with a melody, some other guy will say, hey, listen guys, I have an idea, why don't you try a fiddle? All people who are present in the studio during this process are part of the creative process.
Wow.
It's no longer what Bob Dylan used to do, which is sit at home, write the lyrics and play the guitar and come into the studio with the finished product. This is how things are changed. Also, I have to reiterate this. People today are not going to listen to music with the same amount of concentration as they used to. It's there all the time, coming from speakers on the street, in restaurants, in hotels, in airplanes. When you watch a clip on YouTube, Instagram, picture, there is constantly content composing your experience and your life. There's a soundtrack to your life. This is different than the way it used to be, where if you wanted to listen to music, you would turn on the radio. Or you would clear some time and sit with your earphones and listen to your favorite vinyl. That's no longer the case. It's on the fly, on the go, all the time. It's a different experience. We have to understand what it means to have a different experience.
Gadi, I'm getting anxious just by thinking of how many questions I have for you, diving in all different directions. So I'm already booking you for another episode because we didn't even begin to scratch the surface. And I'm so honored that you're giving me this time.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and you give me a chance to reflect. So.
I'm beyond thrilled for this. Thank you so much. I have a few questions about you.
Yeah.
About Gadi again.
The least interesting thing, yeah.
Take me back to middle school. Mm-hmm. What fascinated you as a kid? What subject in school?
Music, and then some music, yeah.
Throughout your career, a role model, some inspiration?
Yeah. Well, there are artists that I immediately, if I will play a track by a few selected artists, I would probably immediately, unconditionally start crying. My family is always laughing at me. So instead of mentioning now 10 or 20 artists or vocalists or composers, I'll just mention a few artists. But a big inspiration during the latter 15 years is Gidor Krishnamurti. I think the greatest teacher and philosopher and writer of the 20th century, wrote many books. There are some centers of teaching that are nowadays open in England and in California. The guy was phenomenal in his ability to look at his own brain, hard disk as I call it, and internal mechanisms, and be able to teach. This is very hard topic to talk about because words are standing in between you and the understanding, and yet the only way to explain is with words. The one who managed to write the best books about this topic, in my eyes, is Gidor Krishnamurti. He really lays it out for you if you want to follow the path. And he's the first writer who said, it's a pathless path. And yet he wrote the books. So it's an incredible inspiration. Gidor Krishnamurti, yeah.
First thing I'm doing after this is...
Please.
And if I were to ask you, or both anybody that you worked with, anybody that knows you or yourself, who's Gadi? Now, who's Gadi today? 2021.
Gadi today is the sum total of his conditionings from the Israeli culture and the Jewish religion and life, international life, and relationship with Yuri. And everything, 51 years are actually, without realizing it, are very much a part of how I interface with the world now. Right now I'm with you, you're asking what is Gadi? Gadi is the entire hard disk. And Gadi should be allowed to continue to unfold without any interruption. And I learned not to interrupt. That's a very hard thing to do as a father, not to interrupt your kids, and as a person, not to interrupt Gadi. This inner voice is sacred to me. However, the true you, or the true each and every one of us, is not limited to the mind-body organism. That I can say for sure. There is a bigger thing going on. And let's stop there because this is not a spirituality course. So, but human race is about to experience a big shift in consciousness. It's happening as we speak. The digital global village is a big part of it, a big step forward. Yeah.
Gadi,
thank you very much for listening and for asking these wonderful questions. Thank you.